I don't know how to start these videos. Alright folks, how's it going? I need to watch other people's videos and see how they start them. Because I just go straight into the numbers and it feels too abrupt and like, I don't know, I feel like there should be some sort of introduction. Alright folks, welcome to my investment diary, where I talk you through how my portfolio has been doing over the week and various other things that might crop up as well. You'll see here that I'm a terrible investor. Here's my return since 2017 compared to the life strategy 100, 80 and 60. So this week my portfolio dropped by 2.32%. So obviously it was the Fed reduced their rates, but they kind of signalled for the future that they're kind of neutral and data dependent, which to me, I always thought they were data dependent every week. So I don't know, it's just a load of nonsense really. Either this drop is nonsense or the rise that happened before it is nonsense. Either way, to me it's just noise, you know. To me what the Fed said this week is just in line with how they should always act, data dependent. Anyway, so there we go. Yeah, I've underperformed again, and obviously because everything's going down, the ones with bonds in have done better, or they've done less worse than the 100% equities ones like Life Strategy, and mine is almost 100% equities. So that all makes sense. And so let's have a look where that performance came from. Oh, you'll notice I've switched back to Firefox. I switched to Brave because of the ad blocker started doing badly on Firefox, and I've switched back to Firefox for the exact same reason. Because Brave is based on Chrome, which is owned by Google. They have some control of it, Google does, so it kind of makes the ad blocker less effective on their own websites. So yeah, I'm back to Firefox, which I prefer anyway, because that button, to go full screen is one button instead of two, and to zoom in and out is one button instead of two. So I much prefer Firefox, because in Brave and Chrome you have to, it's a two tap move. You have to go there and then there or there to do these functions, whereas in Firefox it's one click, and then to get back to 100% it's one click as well. Anyway, that's completely off topic. So here's the performance attribution. Aberdeen Asian, I didn't notice that. Asia Focus has done all right, but yeah, I mean the rest of it is all just down, as with the markets really. And if you go to Fundsmith, I know one thing that was particularly bad this week. Novo Nordisk. They had trial results yesterday, didn't they? Something like they were expecting a 25% loss in weight for the new drug, and they got like a 22% loss. So yeah, that's bad. That's worse than expected. These things were going too high anyway for drug companies, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, because you know the best case scenario, the patent runs out eventually, doesn't it, on all these new drugs? So I always felt like the upside was somewhat limited anyway. But you know, you just buy. Fundsmith doesn't sell things because they go possibly overpriced. He sells them when the fundamentals start doing badly, or when the business starts doing badly. But I was thinking about this today, because this only happened yesterday. I was thinking about how the Novo Nordisk holding has gone down to 4.64, and since I've been running this Fundsmith approximation, I've kind of noticed how that happens. You know, you see various companies rise up the list. If I do Control Shift Alt 1, it reorders it in order of size, and then things go up and down, like LVMH. When I first started, LVMH was up here somewhere. Costco's going higher and higher. Alphabet's going higher and higher. But it reminded me of those videos you see on YouTube. See if I can find one. Oh, pressing escape doesn't get me out of the full screen. I have to go there. Okay, that's one thing that's annoying about Firefox. Yeah. So it's very much like this, where you see at some point Internet Explorer is going to come down the list. But it's very much like this, watching the portfolio develop. I've never had that before, because I've never ran my own portfolio, and I'm not really running this portfolio. It's just that I'm seeing under the bonnet as things happen. You know, it's kind of a different emotional journey, because normally when you own funds or investment trusts, you don't get to see what's under the bonnet moving day to day or week to week like I am seeing now. But yeah, so it's like that. So so when things like this 20% drop happen, I'm learning that actually it's probably normal. Probably all of my other funds have shares that occasionally have 1 or 2 shares in each year where there'll be a massive drop like that, and where they will go from the top 10 holding down and stuff. So, but yeah, even though there's a 20% drop in Novo Nordisk this week, Fundsmith hasn't done that much worse than any of the other funds. It's only 3.05% down. So, for all I know, all of these funds could have had something in there that dropped. Probably not one that was like number 3 in the list, but I'm sure these things happen all the time without you really noticing. Now I think everything else was pretty much just not too far off the overall performance, really. And there's the dividends. There's really no point in me speaking about it, is there? There's the dividends. The only big one was Aberdeen Asia Focus, 59 quid. And what have we got here? Oh yeah, I've never really owned American stocks before, so when a new dividend is announced for my UK holdings, I get a little email from the London Stock Exchange because I've signed up to their email service. But yeah, for Pfizer, I didn't receive anything, but when the other announcement came out, I decided to look this up just to see what the dividend was doing, and we can see here they've had a dividend raise. So it's gone from 42 to 43p, which is, I think, because I was a little bit worried about this dividend. I was thinking to myself, mentally get myself prepared for possibly a cut or possibly a flat dividend for the year. But as we can see, they've actually decided to keep raising the dividend by 2.4% this year, which is good. And they had the next thing I've linked here is an update on their guidance for the year, which we can see here. Basically they're just kind of confirming the previous guidance, really. I think this is a case of neutral news is good news, because as we can see, it booked the trend for the week. Pfizer was up 3% for the week. I don't know how it's done in pound terms, but that's the dollar rise. Just this guidance confirmation, or I don't know if there's any sort of positive news in there as well. I'm not sure, really. I didn't read a lot of it, to be honest. But just purely the fact that the dividend has gone up for the year gives me a little bit more confidence. So basically, if at some point I decide to equalise these two positions, I wouldn't be. You shouldn't be surprised, because Pfizer is a higher yield, even with the 15% tax that gets taken off. What else happened today? I can't even remember this one. This week, I mean. Oh yeah, when I first read it, I was like, well, this isn't really news, is it? But actually, it's kind of one step along in the sale of all of the assets. They're now down to one party they're negotiating with. I presume they're still doing the due diligence, who knows, but they've set a date, I think, of February. Yeah, so they reckon anticipates that negotiations with the preferred bidder will be concluded in February. So to me, that sounds like, the fact that they're still negotiating sounds like the price they're being offered might not be high enough. I'm not so sure, and then the shareholders will have to approve it as well. So I don't know, but again, the market again seems to have liked it. They're up 4.99% for the week, so we're 26% up now on this holding. The discount is now 26% from its NAV. When we were down here, I was thinking to myself, like, 70. If we got it all sold for 70p, that would be pretty nifty. So if we did still get 70, it's not that much. It's not that much higher anymore. It goes to a 35% profit. But who knows? I could be completely wrong. I remember when this happened with Hypnosis, we had a bid, and then I sold too early, and I think I left like 10% on the table because the bids went higher. So this time I'm just going to let it happen. I don't know at what point I'll sell. Maybe if for instance, if there was only like 3% between the bid price and the share price before purchase was completed, then maybe I'll just sell early, just for the sake of getting into my next things as soon as possible. Because what I'm thinking is, So far, Gresham House, which is another battery storage one, another one which isn't paying a dividend, so similar to Harmony Energy, but these guys aren't actually selling the portfolio, so who knows what catalyst might happen. But I'm thinking if the bid for Harmony Energy comes in and it gets sold and it continues, because what's happened is Harmony Energy's share price has risen, Gresham House has continued to like dwindle away here, whereas Harmony Energy's gone up. So if the bid comes in here and I sell Harmony Energy, and if the bid for Harmony Energy hasn't affected the discount with Gresham House, you would expect it to, though, wouldn't you? Because Harmony Energy getting a decent price for their assets should really give prospective shareholders in Gresham House Energy some confidence, really. But if that confidence hasn't been priced in by the time we get a decent bid for Harmony Energy, I'll probably jump into Gresham House just to keep it in a similar kind of investment with it. And then who knows what might happen to Gresham House. At some point they might start paying a dividend again, in which case they've got a nice little earner for the dividend. Or they might decide to do what Harmony Energy have done. They might see what Harmony Energy do, and the shareholders might think, oh, hang on, I want a bit of that, and so they might do the same thing. Who knows? By the time February comes around, for all I know, Gresham House's discount could be the same as Harmony's. Who knows? Because it's February, it's a couple of months away. For all I know, they could announce the dividend returning, couldn't they, Gresham House, and that might send the share price going up. So whether the opportunity's there in a couple of months' time is open. We don't know. But yeah, as usual though, I will just keep £3,000 in Gresham House, and I'll put the profits, which are currently at 794. The profits will probably go into SEHD. Alright, so it's a short one, so I think I'll cover one of the topics I've kind of stored up to cover. Basically, I just want to spend a few minutes just looking at renting versus buying. I mean, for me personally, it doesn't matter what the finances say or the numbers say. I don't want to own because I don't want to stay somewhere for more than a couple of years maximum. At the moment, I don't want to stay anywhere more than a couple of months maximum. I mean, the only way I could envisage me buying is when I did want to settle down and I looked for rental places and there was just nothing for rent, which I do believe could happen at some point. So I'm not ruling out buying, but it's a sort of, I'll only end up really buying if the rental market just gets so limited that I have no choice but to buy. So I can envisage that happening, but I'd really rather just rent. Even so, if we take me personally out of the situation, the overwhelming majority of people want sort of suggest buying, don't they? They suggest that as the way to go in life. And whenever, like on Reddit, and whenever someone mentions that they're renting and they're retiring, everybody would suggest to them to buy because it's a hedge against inflation, and buying probably is technically or most likely the best choice. But I question whether renting is so much of a bad idea, especially in retirement, that it warrants like the vast majority. There'll be like one person in like 20 who will be saying, "Oh, renting's okay. There's nothing wrong with renting." I'll be one of those people saying, "Oh, renting's okay." But I still agree that in the vast majority of cases, owning will end up being financially better, especially if you're giving, if you have children or grandchildren who are inheriting from you, because you get an extra inheritance allowance, don't you, if you own a home when you die. So yeah, I still agree that in the vast majority of cases, owning will probably work out better financially. But I just question whether it really warrants like the overwhelming majority of people who like are really worried about other people renting in retirement. Long-time viewers will probably recognise this spreadsheet that I've got on the screen here. I did a video of it. If you go back to my catalogue of videos, it's one of the very early ones I did. It compares renting and buying financially. It doesn't do absolutely everything needed. For instance, it doesn't take into account that the extra money, because what it does is it it inputs all of the numbers. I don't know what's a good, I'm not actually sure what a good mortgage interest rate is anymore. It's kind of irrelevant anyway. I've got 5.19% in here. I don't know when I typed that in. I'm guessing at some point that was a realistic number, but it's probably not realistic anymore. But anyway, the exact numbers that are in this spreadsheet at the moment aren't really the point. The point I want to make with this spreadsheet is it tots up the net worth in the two different scenarios based on these inputs. The inputs are pink, and what I just did before I started recording is I picked a random town, Carlisle, in Cumbria, and I found two houses. You know, they're not exactly comparable, but they're kind of newish looking. If we go to that, it's newish looking. I quite like the idea of having a carport actually. I mean, to be honest, the one that's for sale seems a bit older to me. So, I don't know, it's hard to tell, but, you know, they're not completely miles apart, these two houses. They've both got 2 bedrooms. And I just put in the price, and I just inputted the price of the house, 175k, versus the rent, which is 795 for the other one. I've kept the assumptions that were already in here. I've got the house price the maintenance for the house, I've put in at 800 quid, just a complete guess, really. I imagine there'll be a lot to do when you first buy it, and then less and less over the years. Or then who knows, a boiler might go and it'll be £2,000 for a year. Who knows? So I've got the maintenance for the property going up by 3%, the inflation of the house price going up by 3%, and we've got them. Let's say they've got a mortgage with a loan to value of 72%, 73% almost, and we can see here that, as in that video that I did years ago, this spreadsheet always shows. Pretty much always shows. It depends. Obviously, it depends on the exact house. For instance, I mean, if the rent was £400 a month, obviously the renter would win all the way, wouldn't they? Because that rent is really low compared to the price of the house. But obviously, in most cases, with a comparable house and a comparable renting house, the net worth of the person owning the home is pretty quick to overtake, because obviously you've got upfront costs when you buy the home, so it starts off less, and well, here we can see that within 1 year, the net worth of the owner has gone up by more. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account. It's just some. I probably spent an afternoon making this spreadsheet years ago, but so it's not that sophisticated. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account tax. Either way, so like if this excess money you were investing as the renter, because that's what happens here, the excess money gets invested at this investment return of 8%. If that money was invested in a SIP or a workplace pension, for instance, it doesn't add the tax relief. And then on the other side, it doesn't add the tax you have to pay when you pull it out of the pension either. So it's not an exact spreadsheet. It's not completely comparable. I guess what it is comparable for is if all of the excess money was going in an ISA. That would make sense, because there's no tax relief going into an ISA and there's no tax to be paid on the way out. So this number, that's a good way of framing it actually. This is if all the excess was going in an ISA. But if you wanted to do it more accurately, you could edit the spreadsheet and add tax relief going into a SIP at your marginal rate, and then you could take off tax relief on the way out. Anyway, this just to make sure you understand, there's limitations to the numbers that are being shown here. They're not completely accurate for every situation. But yeah, as you can see, most of the time the buyer always wins. But what I'm talking about here is when people in retirement, like it's in the Fire UK subreddit mostly. When you're talking about someone who's retiring, this spreadsheet takes a whole different angle, because if you were retiring, you wouldn't need the mortgage would have been paid off, wouldn't it? So if the choice is buy or rent in retiring, if the choice is keep the house you already own or sell it and rent, which is harder to do because it takes longer to put the money into the ISAs, you see, so it's a bit trickier. But if you were renting already, I guess you could look at it like this. Let's look at it as if you were me. I've got a load of money in ISAs and LISAs and stuff, and I don't own a property anymore. So let's look at it as if you were me. Should I buy or sell? I wouldn't be able to get a mortgage. I mean, I don't know, would I? I often wonder that. Is there any way of getting a mortgage when you're just living off a portfolio? I don't think there is. But if I could get a mortgage, probably the numbers, maybe if I could get a 50% mortgage. So let's go 50, 60. Let's say I put 70 grand of my own money into it. Oh, that's a 60. Okay, so let's put a bit more. Let's put 80 grand of my own money in it. LTV of 55%. Yeah, even at 55% LTV, owning the home wins. Even down to 42 years, I'll be dead by then. But yeah, more likely I probably won't ever be able to get a mortgage, since I'm never going to work again probably. So I would just put the whole amount in myself. I can't afford this at the moment, but this is just it's just one example of a house. If I could afford that, I would have to go 100% just buying it in cash, wouldn't I? And as you can see here, when there's no gearing on the house, the renter doesn't lose out, and you just have to trust me. These were literally the first two I looked at. I didn't look in other areas. I just randomly chose Carlisle. I just found these two because that looked reasonably new. All the other houses looked pretty old compared to this one. And then again for the renting one, I went for a reasonably new, I think maybe the 80s or something. It's hard to tell really. But yeah, this was just a random one. And obviously these numbers will be different for any two houses you compare, or any two flats you compare. Obviously with a flat, this number will go up because there'll be maintenance charges and ground rent and stuff. But yeah, so as you can see, when the gearing goes to zero and there's no loan, it's not such a one-sided story. Here, in this case, the renter is winning. And obviously all of these inputs, they do have a big effect on the result though, because you can see here the investment returns of 8% I think are pretty realistic, but let's say the investment returns over the long period went down to 7. I mean, looking at these numbers, they're pretty close already, aren't they? So I reckon that's going to mean that the owner will win out quite easily just by going down to 7. Let's look at it after 20 years. 20 years. Oh, I've already changed it, haven't I? Okay. Yeah, we can see here it's already, so see, it's only small inputs changes have a big effect, and you can see there that the net worth of the owner of the house is much higher. And if we go to 9%, we can see here that we can see here that the net worth has gone ahead by a lot more, over 100 grand more for the renter. So obviously it's all unknown and random and impossible to know up front. But when you're talking about renting versus owning or buying in retirement, I think the numbers become much closer, simply because you've already done. Most people go through their life, their working life, they get the mortgage once, they pay it off once, don't they? And then in retirement, they no longer have the benefit of gearing, boosting your net worth when the house price goes up by a small percentage. Because if you, another one of my videos from way back when I first started this channel was where did all my money come from, and in that video I did some rough numbers of the two houses that I used to own and I rented out when I was in my 20s, and I showed how the returns, it was a very approximate estimate of the returns, and I showed how a very small percentage per year increase in the house value had a massive impact on the percentage of the money I put into it had grown. And so once you've gone through that gearing process, you've taken the risk of the gearing once, you've paid it off over your 30 year maybe of working. Once that's done, most people aren't going to be able to or want to take on the risk of a big mortgage again, so that this spreadsheet will highly favour the owning side of things. Apart from the personal stuff, I mean, regardless of these numbers, most people aren't like me. Most people just love the feeling of owning their own home. And so no matter what the spreadsheet says, it doesn't matter, it's owning your own home isn't just about the numbers. Just like for me, renting isn't just about the numbers. I prefer renting because that's my personal preference. And regardless of these numbers that I'm showing now with the zero LTV, most people would prefer to own anyway. So none of this really matters for most people. For people like me, or for I guess this is really aimed at people who are on the fence. They're like, oh, I can see the pros of renting. I like renting, but I also like owning my own home. I'm not really quite sure which way I'd like to go. So for those people in the middle, I just feel like it should be known that the numbers don't necessarily favour buying when it comes to retirement living, because the mortgage, you're not benefiting from the gearing anymore. Will rent outpace my income? Because that's the risk. Because here I've got rent inflation at 3%, and I've got house price inflation at 3%. The question is, what happens if rent? Obviously, if we change this number, even to 4%, I bet the numbers heavily favour owning just by going from 3 to 4%. If we go to 20 years again, let's go to this same cell, 20 years. So if we go to 4% and we click there, you see it's not that bad actually. Oh, hang on a sec. Net worth, rent inflation, 4%. Oh yeah, so it has gone to favouring the buyer, but I was expecting a bigger difference, to be honest. That's only about 30 grand difference, isn't it? I was actually expecting a bigger difference. Let's see what happens when we go to 5%. So that's surprising to me. I was expecting that to be more sensitive to the rent inflation. I really was. Because what they say is, each year you're going to have to pay more rent. Your spending is going to go up much higher than our spending when we own a home. But I think a lot of people don't realise that if you don't own a home, you have more capital in your portfolio. So if your portfolio is bigger, you have more income that you can take from it. And the standard 4% rule, in quotes, is that the amount of money can cover you 4% on year one, and then raised by inflation each year for 30 years. It can cover you for that amount. To me, the logic of that argument doesn't make any sense. You can still pay the extra inflation. The question is, will rent go up higher than the rest of than other inflation? So I found here, where was it here? I found this index of private rents, and I've downloaded it, and I've got this little spreadsheet here that has RPI, CPI, and each month I just add to it. I put the new number in there, and I found it for rent. Unfortunately, it only goes back to 2015. I've put all the data together. This is the average for the whole year, for the calendar year. Obviously, at the moment, there's one data point missing, so this year's probably going to go higher. Because if that number comes in at 118, for instance, the 8.36% there is going to go higher. When I press return, that 8.36 will go up. Yes, up to 8.8. So it's going to go a little bit higher for this year. But obviously, so far, all we've got is November. But as we can see, since 2015, it's gone from 82 to 112. This index has, which is a CAGR of 3.5%. And if we compare that to RPI for the same time period, so this goes from 2015 as well. We can see it there in the formula. We can see that RPI has gone up by 4.56. I don't know if there's if anyone has any suggestion, if anyone knows where I can get data for this that goes back further. Ideally, I'd love it to go back to 1998. Then I can do a proper long-term comparison between the two. So yeah, 3.5% and RPI 4.56. In the recent times, we can see here that if I highlight 22 to 24, RPI is 11.58 in 22, and the rent index went up by 4.23% that year. But then if we look at this year, the rent's going up by 8.36, and so far the rent's only going up, RPI is only going up by 3.45. So it seems to me that all of that inflation we had, there's like a lag effect on the rent. We haven't seen it yet, but hopefully at some point this rent high inflation that we've been having, hopefully it will end at some point. I mean, I'm not going to be renting for at least 3 more years, probably 8 more years before I start renting again, to be honest. It's got time to kind of slow down, but as you can see, it's these years here where rent, there's going to be good times and bad times. As with all inflation, it just has phases. So I think the important thing, as I said in a recent video I was talking about this, was now with the investment trusts growing their income more than inflation. I think what you need to do is, when these sort of times happen here, where it's, I don't know, the numbers are a bit high here, but Then there's a low one again here. But I think what you need to do is in retirement, if inflation's only 0.98% for 1 year, and you and your personal inflation kind of matches it, you know the things you personally buy kind of match up to that. Don't get overconfident. Just keep in the back of your mind that this is good time for inflation. At some point there'll be a bad time for it, and just don't get overexcited. And then when these sorts of times come, you don't get overdepressed. It's hard though. I find this harder, and in fact this is a common phenomenon apparently. Even if your wage went up by 15%, it's still really hard to see the prices go up by 11.58%. There's a disconnect in our minds, and I feel it as well, because even if my dividend income went up by 15% in a year, which it's a crazy year, I'd still feel worse than if I'd had a modest increase in my dividends and the inflation rate matched it. In this year, in particular, the rent is catching up with RPI, but it's not caught up yet if we're comparing to 2015. So who knows, over the next couple of years, we might, for all I know, we might see this CAGR of 3.5 overtake the CAGR there of 4.56. It's hard to tell. And just for the record, what was CPI? 3.28. CPI is always lower for some reason. 3.28 versus 3.5. Okay, so rent. So yeah, rents are beating two of these measures, but I think this is the main measure they use for things, isn't it? RPI. I would imagine most people in the world want to stay where they live. They don't want to ever move from the area they're in because they're content there. I suppose they have a higher risk because these numbers are average, aren't they? These are average over, is it Great Britain? Yeah, it's Great Britain. But if you live in one particular area and you get unlucky, if you're renting and you get unlucky, your area just happens to just do really well, like the local economy does really well, and you're renting, your rent could go up more than the Great British average. So yeah, that to me, that is an important factor to take into consideration actually, which is like a plus point for buying. If you really love your area, it hedges your bets against that area becoming really popular, doesn't it? You don't have to pay extra rent because you own the place. But yeah, again, that's another thing that just doesn't really apply to me because I'm not wedded to any area. I'm happy. I prefer to move around. Just some thoughts. It probably sounded like I was trying to persuade people to rent, but I really wasn't. I was just trying to, I've noticed this about myself. When anything is so one-sided, I always want to take the other side. If on these forums everybody was saying rent, don't buy, it's a waste of money, don't buy, I'd probably be arguing on the buying side. I guess if I want a discussion to be balanced and it's completely one-sided, I have to go completely the other side to try and balance it out. Here in Albania, Macedonia, and I remember there was a lot in Vietnam as well, they have these solar systems for the hot water. I had a slightly tepid shower this morning because we've had quite a few days of cloudy weather. But yeah, as we can see, the sun's out again, so tomorrow we should be back with some proper hot water. It reminds me of living in my caravan. For 6 months of the year, I'd be completely off-grid, and I'd just rely on solar for all my electricity. So sometimes I'd have to cut back. I don't know, I like it. I like not wasting money on stuff like that. Even though I don't pay the electricity bill here, it still feels good to not waste energy heating water. Yeah, and here's a little picture of the other side of the balcony while I'm at it. Bit of a big place for me. I'm normally in little studios. I like to go as small as possible. Not much choice in this city though, or town probably. All right. Anyway, this has gone a bit off the rails, hasn't it? I'll see you next time. Have fun. Bye bye.